Good afternoon, everyone. We are beginning our annual Petersheim Academic Exposition today. This is the 27th annual edition of our Academic Expo. And I just want to do a few quick announcements. As you know, in the room here, in case of an emergency, in case of any issues, the exits are marked with the exit sign, so don't panic, of course, and follow the signs and just go out the exits, and they'll lead you out of the building from there. So just keep that in mind. And if you don't know, the bathrooms are on this side of the building. Okay, so just keep that aware. I'll introduce our speakers today, and we have a whole program which we have on each of your tables the schedule of events. If you open up to the second page or first page, I should say. So I'd like to first introduce Father Lyjuez, who is an assistant professor of systematic theology in our School of Theology, our Immaculate Conception School of Theology. And Father Lyjuez, aside from being a faculty member here and a member of our priest community, is also the president of the Society of Catholic Scientists, our chapter of that, a national organization. And he further does many other things here at the university. So Father Lyjuez, if you can commence with our invocation.
Thank you, Dr. Lopez. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Direct, we beseech thee, O Lord, all our actions by thy holy inspiration, and accompany them by thy grace, so that every thought, word, and deed may both begin from thee and through thee reach completion. Through Christ our Lord. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Tried to move away from paper, so I was looking here for the introduction. So I'd like to introduce our president. So I'm very happy and pleased to welcome our 21st president of Seton Hall University, Dr. Joseph E. Nyre. President Nyre is a first-generation college graduate. He earned 3 advanced degrees and completed pre- and postdoctoral studies at the University of Missouri, the University of Kansas, and Harvard Medical School. He is a psychologist. He has served in faculty capacity and led several prominent universities, including Baylor University, Harvard Medical School, and the University of Illinois Chicago School of Medicine, where he developed a nationally recognized program of research, influencing, and co-authoring vital state and federal legislation. Completing his 12th year as a university president, and 4th, it's really flown, wow. We'll come to know President Nyre firmly supports and advocates for the vital role that faculty play in student transformation and academic discovery. Since taking the helm in 2009 and leading our university through the pandemic, Seton Hall has embraced the faculty voice in academic visioning and strategic planning, has invested in campus learning, living, and social spaces to animate the academic vision, funded new interdisciplinary academies, academic programs, and international partnerships, has elevated our university support for faculty grant attainment, has initiated a faculty compensation study, and has launched the largest fundraising campaign in Seton Hall's history in supporting academic innovation, college affordability, and campus transformation. Please join me in welcoming the 21st president of Seton Hall University, Dr. Joseph E. Nyre.
Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the week when we share, honor, and unite around Seton Hall's academic and scholarly accomplishments. This week is an exposition, but it's also a celebration. We celebrate the inquisitive spark that turns curiosity into discovery. We celebrate the intellectual drive that seeks knowledge and the qualities of reflection that turn knowledge into wisdom. We celebrate engagement and collaboration, effort and determination, excitement and innovation. I'm impressed, frankly amazed, with the range of work that will be presented throughout the week. Our community will gain new knowledge in speech and design, theology and the classics, bioethics and anthropology, and scores of other fields. What our students have done with the support of their dedicated faculty highlights the depths of Seton Hall's engagement with the most pressing conversations, challenges, and debates of our time. The benefits for students are wide-ranging. They achieve a greater degree of self-confidence, advance their oral presentation and performance skills, and produce work that will impress a graduate school or a future employer. In completing these projects and performances, they've learned to reach a little further beyond their grasp. They've elevated our understanding of the world, and in doing so, they've elevated themselves. To our student presenters, thank you for gracing us with the fruits of your curiosity, talent, and determination. You know how it feels to create something entirely new, and I hope you will remember this experience and use it as a springboard to create even more memorable accomplishments, whether in the academic setting or throughout your careers. I would also like to acknowledge and thank our dedicated members of the Academy who guided these journeys of discovery. With skill and generosity, you led students on an academic and artistic adventure. You shared your passion for learning. Your love of knowledge inspired them to learn more about the topics and themselves. Though students were the primary beneficiaries of this work, I know that you gained much from these collaborations. Thank you for taking a special interest in our students and inspiring them to greatness. I also want to thank and I'm grateful to Suli Chan, Jose Lopez, and everyone on the Petersheim committee for making this an exceptional week. And I'm eager for today's keynote presentation, although I'm not able to stay. I'm eager for you to hear from him, a psychologist and someone who also has some roots in Kansas, like myself, Dr. Carl Lejuez, as I'm sure you all are aware. Make no mistake, though, this week is indeed a celebration. From the vantage point, this is the 27th Symposium, and we will honor our academic progress and chart a course to even greater heights. So congratulations to everyone who played a role for this remarkable week. Thank you, and God bless you, and go Pirates. Hear, hear.
We would like to next show you a video of the Expos to introduce you to the wonderful event that we celebrate here annually. People always ask me, what's your favorite time of year? And I say, at Seton Hall in the academic year, it's the Expo week.
I'm so pleased to stand before you to revisit the spirit that was Petersheim.
At our annual academic exposition, as one university, we honor the best in academic achievement.
I'm so grateful for the opportunity that Petersheim gave me and continues to give students across the university. Congratulations on an amazing 25th year.
That was from 25 years, from our 25th anniversary, but this year is our 27th anniversary. So I'd like to acknowledge, as President Nyre has, all of the people who make this event possible. And I would like for all of them to stand up if you're part of our steering committee or organizing committee. I see quite a few of them standing in the back already, but I'd just like to acknowledge them for a second. Everyone that you see in the back of the brochure that we have today are members of the organizing committee, but then we have various events. This week we have over 30 different events, and we have all the different event organizers. A lot of modest people, nobody stood up. So in particular, I'd like to now introduce Professor Suli Chang, who is the co-chair along with myself for the last few years. Suli has been working on the Petersheim organization for 27 years, since the very, very beginning. So she's one of our longest standing members of our organizing committee. Suli will make an introduction, and we will continue from there. So Suli.
Thanks to President Nyre for the nice welcome. Also that I would like to join Professor LaPaz to welcome you all to the opening ceremony as well as the whole week's events. And it's a great honor to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Lejuez, and he's the Stony Brook University Provost there. However, our Associate Provost, John Bushman, will, on behalf of the committee, to introduce our speaker. But I would like to say a few words about Provost Bushman. And Dr. Bushman is the Dean of the University Library, and a few years ago, he became our Associate Provost for Research and Innovation. Provost Bushman has been actively engaged in the innovative, refreshing, stimulating strategy our Provost Katia Pasolini implemented a few years ago. And particularly, they expand this expo going to the Big East that we have been talking about that. I would like to take just 1 minute or 1.5 minutes, share with you how Provost Bushman has been involved in the 2023 academic exposition events. The first is that he's one of the key speakers for the section entitled Ethics Across Discipline that will be held tomorrow. And among a variety of disciplines, Provost Bushman will discuss about information ethics and fundamental democratic challenges. The second event is that Provost Bushman has been instrumental to organize and well modulate the one day long event to showcase Seton University's faculty research on Wednesday. And Provost Bushman believed that research is integral to succeeding to gathering evidence to theory and contribute to the development knowledge. And faculty and their research project have the vital role in moving this forward at Seton Hall. On behalf of the Expo Committee, thank you, Provost Bushman, for your heavy involvement in the 2023 Expo event. As I mentioned, we are very grateful that Provost Bushman has agreed to introduce our speaker. Please join me to welcome Provost Bushman.
Thank you, Dr. Chang. I think you give me a little too much credit. Thanks to Jose and Suli again. I echo President Nyre's comments. So without further ado, and I was coached on how to pronounce it, Carl W. Lejuez is Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs at Stony Brook University. You can see the title of his talk up here. This is going to be a very interesting thing because we are debating how we spend our resources to get the most bang for the buck in the Provost's office right now. So, Provost.
Thank you so much, and I'm really thrilled to be here, and for some reasons that will become evident as I talk. But when I had gotten this invitation, I went to my chief of staff at Stony Brook and I said, "What do you think if I talk about budgets?" And she said, "That's a great idea if you want to bore everyone to death." Maybe they need a nap early in the week, so it's a tough time. And of course, that made me want to do it more. And what I really hope to do today is to take something that can often seem so disconnected from why we got into academia in the first place. Our love of the liberal arts and sciences, our passion for getting a professional degree and trying to change the world. And I think that separation is at our own peril. And I've been thrust into some situations where I've needed to really focus not just on the academic mission, but also on budgets. And I have found that there is a lot of interesting, important work in that. And so I'm taking a risk here. Usually, these days, most things I presented 300 times before. This is my first time, so we'll see if it's my one and only. But I am going to start with my deep love for northern New Jersey bagels. I have lived in West Virginia. There are no good bagels there. I have lived in Atlanta long before Atlanta had really gotten good at food. There were no good bagels there. I've lived in Rhode Island. They think they have good bagels there. I've lived in Connecticut. They think they have. Maryland. My whole life I've been kind of trying to get back to this area. And this will play an important part of the rest of the presentation, but first I want to kind of align us to what I want to talk about. And so there are a few kind of adages that I will tell you where I got them from in a second, but these are things that are really important as we think about our priorities, the things we deeply care about. I cannot say enough times, we always have to come back to why we care about academia so much, why we are passionate for this. Without that, it becomes something very different. So the first is, we can do anything, we just can't do everything. The house may be beautiful on the outside, but what about the cracks in the foundation? Don't spend money you don't have yet. Plan for the future. When there are dark roads ahead, and there's a few things there, I'll come to those. And always lead with your values, particularly when you reach these situations where you have multiple values pushed up against each other. So I'm back to my bagel. So this morning, I got up early and I had my talk done and I said, okay, I'm gonna go find a place to get a bagel. And I guess I should have known this, but I drove right by the high school I went to. And I hadn't really kind of thought about that for a while. I grew up in Secaucus, New Jersey, and I ended up going to MKA for my junior and senior year. And this is, something that as I think about those different adages, those all actually came from my mother. These are things that she taught me when I was young about how you think about life, what are the ways in which you value your priorities. I don't know if anyone here watches Succession. I'm obsessed with that show. If not, I promise, we'll get through this quickly. But Jerry always says, how does this advance my own personal agenda? Now, if we just separate that with how does this advance our collective goals and passions within academia? And so when I was 14, my father passed away. And I was at Secaucus High School at that time. And by the way, if you grew up in Secaucus, you call it Secaucus. Everyone else accidentally corrects me often. Oh, you mean Secaucus, as if I didn't live there. So if you have that urge, I just want to let you kind of work it out. So my father passed away, and we had a little bit of money that came from that. And I remember we sat down at the table, it was just my mother and I, And she said to me, okay, we can do anything, we just can't do everything. What is important for our family? And we made a decision together that we would send me to Montclair Kimberly Academy. The 2 years I was there cost more than the house that we lived in, but it was an investment for the future. And when you think about that idea of investing in the future, think about what are your strategic priorities. What does student success mean? What does it mean when we are supporting our students, when we are giving them transformative experiences, when we are meeting them where they are but pushing them to places where they didn't know that they could go? What does it mean in our strategic priorities of research? Being a university that is expanding boundaries. And I will say one thing in the next bullet, I talk a little bit about this idea of you can have a legitimacy story or what's called an advantage story. Now, if we think about Seton Hall, a legitimacy story is Seton Hall sits among the finest Catholic universities in the world. It sits with that legitimacy. So there are things that you expect from that sort of university that happen here. But there's also advantage stories. I would say this is a university that deeply cares about student success, but also has a research infrastructure and a research footprint that other comparable universities, I think Villanova should be jealous of what you all do here. I think there is a real opportunity to think about what are those opportunities, what are the things that make your university special. And service. That is a key piece of this university. It is a priority. It is what you care about. But you always have to ask yourself, is there general awareness of what your priorities are? When I was at UConn, our president, I was provost there, had 3 priorities. Every single person knew what it was. He talked about doubling research, not just research dollars, not ignoring the humanities, but whatever was research success, excellence within your discipline, within your domain. He talked about life transformative education. What were the hands-on experiences for students? And he talked about UConn being an engine for the state of Connecticut. Everybody knew those priorities. So everything we did we had to ask ourselves, how does that advance those priorities? And most importantly, just like my mother and I made that decision when we used all of that money to send me to a different high school, there were lots of things we were choosing not to do. And what does that mean? And are we cognizant of those decisions? Because if we are not, anything seems like a good idea. There are rarely things that we want to do in academia that are not pure, valuable, interesting, useful, but we can't do everything. So if we think about this idea of being strategic, I feel like the thing that I have learned quite a bit is as much as the big strategy is important, what is your foundation? What is the extent to which when we think about student success, do we have enough advisors? Do we have retention advisors that understand where our students might be struggling? Are we investing in mental health? Do we have good course availability? What are those core foundational things? They are not big strategic priorities, but if you don't have them, your university suffers. I love interdisciplinarity, but you can't have strong interdisciplinarity without strong disciplines, without investing in your departments, in your core areas. If you're building grants, do you have grant support? Do you have staff? Do you have the things you need to be successful? Because otherwise, you're hurting your staff, you're hurting your faculty, and you're hurting your students. And in service, are we being thoughtful about everything that we're trying to do, but actually allowing everyone to actualize and be the best academic that they can be. And these things often, as we get into those big priorities, often get lost. And one of the reasons, so there's something called the gambler's fallacy. So on the left, if you look at that, you see if you're flipping a coin, it's a 50-50 chance. So let's say you flip the coin, it comes up tails. Okay, now you're going to flip the coin again. What's the chance it comes up tails? 50-50. It's going to be 50-50 every single time that the coin does not remember what it came up last. So by the last time, a gambler might think, okay, it's been tails 5 times. It has to be heads eventually. There has to be higher odds that it'll be heads. But in fact, that's not true. And a lot of folks, even people who think of themselves as professional gamblers, when they lose all their money, it's because of a fallacy like this. So I'm going to talk about the Provost fallacy, which is the opposite of that. So if you're going into a situation and you're saying, we're going to make a lot of big bets, and let's assume it's 50%, let's even go beyond that. Let's say it's a 75% chance. We're going to start this revenue-generating program. It's going to bring in this money. We're going to do this other thing. It's going to bring in this revenue. And we're going to spend that money now because we know we'll have it later. Well, if you take those 75% chances and you multiply them, the chance of all of those happening is now less than 20%. That is no longer a good bet. And if you've made that bet that all of these things have to happen because you've already spent that money, the things that suffer are these things. So you have this big, bold aspiration, but you have a cracked foundation. So you have to be very careful about this idea of spending money that you don't have yet. The other is planning for the future. It's just very simple here. If many universities were a 17-year-old boy, they would get grounded for the way that they manage their budgets. It's mostly 1 year at a time. And it's not the fault of the budget folks. They're accountants. They don't want to do that. They're great at that sort of stuff. It's not, it is a confluence of factors, but at the end of the day, for the most part, we are 1 year at a time. You can't plan for what's going to happen next. You can't think about how are we going to support our long-term priorities. I mean, you have a president who's been here for a very long time. That is stability. We want to create stability, but quite frankly, in academia, we have lots of provosts, we have lots of presidents, and those priorities sometimes get lost. So are we really thinking, are we looking 5 years in advance? And I think about the libraries. I mean, think about what Elsevier does in terms of every year, everything costs more. I've almost never seen an academic budget that takes inflation into account. That 5 years from now, you're going to spend the exact same amount of money on something 5 years ago. It doesn't make any sense. And the things that always suffer are those foundational priorities. So when things aren't so rosy, what are the ways that you approach them? So the first is don't wait for a crisis. I know there's that famous Rahm Emanuel saying, never miss the opportunity to take advantage of a crisis. I know people love that. I hate that. You need to make the decisions not because a crisis forced you to do it. Quite frankly, I think that's lazy and cowardly. You make decisions because they are the right thing to do. You look ahead into the future, and sometimes you have to make hard decisions, and your answer should never be, for us as a public school, the state forced me to, or the donors forced me to, or this person did. Leadership means you are making decisions with the community because it is the right thing to do. So this is an example. Let's call it a hypothetical university where I hypothetically might have been the interim provost. So I came in, and so the gray line at the top is essentially how much savings the university has. And so it's a lot here. $70 million. This is just rainy day, whatever it might be. So the blue line is how much more you're spending over your revenue. So if you're spending more than you're bringing in, then you got to eat that savings. So over time, things kind of come down because there were 7 bets about all the things that would happen if everything worked out. So I came in and we had we weren't bankrupt. We had, $10 million or so. But if you look what was going to happen next, if you look at the projected spending, which is the blue, over the next few years, within a few years we would have been so in debt that we would have had to take incredibly drastic measures. So we needed to make that decision in that moment and not wait for someone or something else to force it. Now, you might say, well, how do you do it? Do you do it all at once? Do you wait? There's a lot on this graph, but if you look at the green, it took us a $20 million cut to essentially balance out the revenue. So it's a base cut. So it's 20 million gone forever. If we spread it out just over 2 years, you have all these years of being in deficit, and it ends up costing you $2 million more. If you spread it out even more, it's costing you several more $1 million because you're trying to do it slowly. Sometimes slowly works, and sometimes, in a case like this, it's very obvious that it doesn't. So one of the questions is not just what do you do, but what are you going to do different? Academics appropriately are skeptics. We are skeptical when we are asked to do something that it might all be for nothing, that there might not be this everyone's in it together at the end. So if you are going to make these sort of cuts, you have to be able to say what's going to be different. And so we created an entire new budget model for the university. Now, one of the problems is that we waited until the end of every year to decide on raises. We had fallen to 85% of our other comparable universities because every year we waited until the end and there was no money left. The things that were foundational we didn't put first. So the first thing is you change the model so money goes to your foundational things first. The buildings were falling apart. But by the end of the year, there was no money left. So you decide at the start of the year, what do you want to do? What are your foundational priorities? Ensuring that you're supporting your faculty and staff, that you have good facilities. Then you think about the strategic things you want to do. And the other thing that we did was we created a model where it was actually aligned with priorities. Most university budget models can be called historical plus special deals. It's what happened before, and it's all the special deals that were made along the way. The other alternative is really draconian, and that's an RCM, or a responsibility-centered management. That basically means it's all about your revenue. If you bring in revenue, you can spend revenue. And we're so creative, and we almost never think about what could be in the middle. So could you create a model where part of it's revenue, but part of it is research priorities? Part of it is student success. Revenue is about student credit hours, you're bringing in tuition dollars, but student success is, are you making pedagogical advancements? Are you investing in advisors when it might not seem like the exciting thing to do? Are you actually showing that you care about that? And the last priority, we actually put budget into your success in things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. We cared a lot less for what you said you were going to do and we cared a lot more for what you actually accomplished. And if you were a good steward of those funds, we wanted to give you more money. And so the model just allows you to do things differently. But what I did get wrong is I forgot how hard change is. I forgot that everyone else was not focused on this in the same way that I was. So I don't know if you know this, but this is the Burghers of Calais. This is a Rodin sculpture. It's unique for 3 reasons. It breaks 3 major rules of sculpture. The first is it's level with the ground. Sculpture is supposed to be elevated. The second is it's 6 individuals. Sculpture should be manifested through 1 individual. And then the third is it's not positive. It reflects reality. Now, obviously the world's different now, but at the time, this didn't go over too well for Rodin, and most people were very upset about this. But it's a story of a French port town that was taken over, and several burghers, several kind of rich noblemen said, take us as hostage and let the town go. And so that was agreed upon. But what you see in there is they all have a different response to it. So on the left, you have Pierre, and he's very existential about it. I think that's me. That's how I respond to things. You have Jean d'Air somewhere. He's very kind of holding tight and very strong. But behind the back, you have one guy who's freaking out. You have other, and so everyone has a different response to things. And as an administrator, you can't forget that. I did a great job of being transparent. I presented all of it. I ran 3 to 4 hour town halls, no scripted questions. The town hall ended when every question was done. I got some of that stuff right, but I didn't anticipate how hard it would be for the community to suddenly hear this one day. And I wish I could have gotten that right, but sometimes you learn things the hard way. But you have to understand that people can have the experience that they are going to have. And the more power that you get as an administrator, the less control you have. And that is an important message about budgets. You can try to control things, but you actually can't. So then the last thing is always leading with your values. So if you read this kind of mission statement for Seton Hall, and you think about the core things, so is it sharing, honor, and unity? Exactly the things you'd think of or describe a pirate, so that makes sense. So you've got these things, and they're all value-centered. That is a core piece of this university. So when you think about your priorities, you always ask, are your values actually there? Are they meaningful? So are you being innovative? Are you doing things the same old way? Are you paying attention to equity, to inclusion, creating a level playing field? Just to use an example, it was a case where we wanted to create more hands-on student experiences. That's a value. That is really important. And we didn't have the resources to do it the right way. And we ended up not doing it because it became clear as we came back to, wait, but what about our values here? We were creating an equity issue because students who needed to work could not take advantage of this. So we actually would have created more disparities in trying to do something that was one of our values. So sometimes your values are up against each other, and you have to make really hard decisions. You're almost never picking the good option versus the bad one. You were picking the least broken, flawed option among several really broken and flawed options. And you've got to very aggressively take that option, even though not everyone, it's not going to make sense to everyone. And that's why you've got to take shared governance really seriously. You've got to bring things to the community when it's a problem, when it's an opportunity, not once you've made the decision. And if we could do that with budgets more as an academic community, it wouldn't mean everyone would be happy, but there would be more understanding. We would make better decisions. The more I've leaned into shared governance, the more I've realized most of the time I don't have the best idea. Most of the time the community has the best idea. And if you don't take that opportunity to get that, you will make worse decisions. And so part of that is bringing things early. That's why it's really important to make sure that you're forecasting, you're thinking about things, you're not waiting for that crisis. And then finally, as I think about the value of this in thinking about this event, it's important to recognize people, honoring people, being able to recognize all that hard work that goes into things, and then to build on what happens in the classroom, what happens in labs, in an authentic way where the community comes together and you think about where you want to go together. So in all of the events over the next week, if you think about how we utilize an approach to budgeting where we remember why we care about this, we are practical and thoughtful, balanced with some of those big risks. We're transparent, we're honest, and we involve the community. That's exactly the opportunity that this week presents. And I wish we did something like this. Maybe we're going to start copying it. Maybe we should try to hire both of you, and then you can run ours. Anyway. So let me leave it there. Thank you for inviting me today. It really is a great honor. I'm first generation, so my family didn't really, the rule in our family for Thanksgiving was you got to sit at the adult table when you were either married or had a job, so graduate school didn't count. So my family always still has lots of questions about, so this was, when I showed them this was a big deal to them. So, all right, I'll stop there.
So we now open up the floor for questions to Provost Lejuez. Any questions? I'll walk the microphone around, probably easier than having you.
And I also love really long statements with a question mark at the end, too. We're great at that.
First off, I want to thank you so much for coming here and sharing your wisdom about this topic. I know that we've been, I don't want to necessarily say we've been running into budget issues, but it is a bit of a hot topic regardless of what university you go to, really. So I think I'm actually a graduate student, so I want to know, like, as a provost, how do you take into consideration both the needs of your student body and your faculty and your other staff?
Yeah, I mean, it's really challenging when they are not aligned. A lot of times they were aligned, and that's easy to do. But when we think about trying to create the experience that we want for students, that means faculty who are appropriately compensated and staff who have a career trajectory and feel like they're getting somewhere at their university, and all of those things are really important, having good facilities. But all of those things contribute to the cost of the education. It contributes to student debt. It leads us to have to ask questions like, can we spend enough on mental health to meet all of the challenges that are happening? And so there isn't any particular right answer, but what I do think is administrators have spent too long making those decisions on their own and not engaging the community early enough. And I would like to, this is about universities more broadly, and me, myself. I would like to see us do that more, and that means we have unions at Stony Brook. It means engaging with the unions. It means working with student advisory boards. It means taking your faculty senate really seriously and bringing an agenda to them and talking through things that you would like to work on together. And so then you're just more likely to get that balance right when you have the whole community working on it. But there will be lots of times where you realize you don't have it right, and that's why it's very important at the end of every year that you really look and say, okay, this is our strategic plan. These are the things we say we care about. These are our values. This is where our budget went. Do these align? Are there things that we say at Stony Brook? We talk about the student experience all the time. We have 1,000 students for every advisor. So we're gonna have to fix that this year. And it's going to be painful, and it's going to mean a few fewer faculty hires. It's going to mean a variety of different things. But I can't with a straight face tell a parent that we care about student success when I'm not convinced that your child will be able to get an advising appointment in time for it to be valuable. So I think that's just the kind of things we balance.
Okay, thank you so much.
Other questions? Yes.
So I worry a little bit about the balance of voice. How do you know you're hearing the whole community? And this comes from someone who spent years being the squeakiest wheel so that I was sure I got heard.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is relying on your university senate. I've been at places where the Senate, and by that also student Senate, I don't know if you all have a staff Senate, but I've been at places where they have been really strong. And they have actually been elected representatives of the entire community. So you knew when you were talking to those folks, they took it seriously that they were then bringing it out to the community, they were gathering feedback. I've also been at other places where the Senate had largely been ignored, and so it didn't do a whole lot. And so I think the first thing is actually taking those elected bodies really seriously and putting then the responsibility on them that they are not there to engage with me, they're there to represent that whole community. So that's one way to do it. Another way is to send too many emails. I mean, people complain about how many emails I send all the time. I try to be really clear. The first line is, this is what it's about. If you're not interested in this, please delete it. But lots of clarity about what you're doing and lots of opportunity to gather that feedback. You're never going to get it completely right. You will always miss some communities. Some of the folks whose opinion you want the most are not paying attention to administration. I didn't even know what a provost was for the first 10 years that I was here because I didn't care. And it only scared me, and I just wanted to avoid all that. And so you'll miss it a lot, but I think it's less that you've heard from everyone and more that people think you authentically care about their opinion. And I think if they believe that, they're willing to forgive a lot of times where you may not as effectively gather it as you could.
Okay. Any further questions? Yes.
If I can call you Carl, I remember you from clinical psychology. I was a younger clinical psychologist once, and I remember you at the various schools you've been at. So I just want to say it's nice to see you again. My name is Jarita. You probably don't know who I am, but I know Justin Nash says hello to you from UConn. But it's just so nice to see you in your career path and being a provost. And I can share with you, I'm a new provost at University of Southern Maine starting next year. So I think clinical psychologists really are trained to be great administrators. So I just want to say thank you for all that you do, and thank you for being here today, Carl.
Right, but the other side of it is we are so hard on ourselves that when I was a faculty member, I loved it. I loved every single day. I don't enjoy being an administrator. I do it. No, I do it because I feel like I can have value. And as a faculty member, I always thought other faculty could do what I did. You know, there were so many smart, good faculty I knew that it would be painful, but I also felt like the difference I could make was worth doing. And so as you're a new provost, there will be days where it doesn't, because there's some days where you're making a 55-45 decision and you are letting down 45% of the people. You are disappointing them. You are not being the person they thought you could have been. And you did your best. And that part, that idea of being in that role, it's got to be about, at the end of the day, I feel like the institution can be a little bit better because I'm willing to be in that uncomfortable space. And that's where being a clinical psychologist is. It's partially that you can have someone yell at you and you don't take it personally, but the other piece is that you also can sit in your own discomfort and you realize that's okay. Thank you. That was so sweet what you said. I appreciate it.
Further questions? So let's thank. So one of the things, of course, that is key with the academic exposition every year is honoring our students, and both our undergraduate and our graduate students, and the wonderful work that they do each year. I always love seeing the presentations and during the expo, and then seeing how the work evolves, and then the following year they come back and present their work. And some of them go on. Suli and I have the opportunity to have this bird's-eye view and see how they take their research and their scholarship, and they go to all conferences all over the country, and in some cases all over the world, and present the work. So the fruits of the labor, how it starts here, it's presented here, and how it flourishes and goes beyond Seton Hall. So what has been happening over the last 2 years is we have been selecting in the different events, the event organizers have been selecting the best of the best student research presentations that are given. And what the Academic Expo decided to do a few years ago was to provide travel awards. And these awards are $1,000, and they provide for registration fees, air flights, all sorts of participation costs that you would need to present your work outside of Seton Hall. And one of the things that's further been realized, and this was thanks to the various provosts of all the Big East schools, the athletic conference, the Big East schools, is they decided a few years back, then of course COVID came about, they decided that we not only need to honor athletics and our student athletes, but we also need to honor our scholars and the researchers that we have among our students. So that is very much in line and endeared to what Matthew Petersheim, who the namesake of the Petersheim Academic Expo, came up with. Professor Petersheim used to say that we at Seton Hall, like many universities, honor our athletics tremendously, and that those are our external facing. Everybody knows about our athletics and the different achievements because it shows up in the media. But many people don't know in the external community about what happens at Seton Hall, what happens in our classrooms, in our laboratories, and in our different facilities here on campus. So Professor Petersheim organized the Expo 27 years ago, and it's flourished through there. So the provosts at the Big East schools decided to do a similar thing. So they basically stole our idea and decided to do a symposium right before the men's championship basketball games, the Big East games. This year it was March 14th, and decided that each of the Big East schools, of which there are 11, would send 5 research projects, 5 of the best students, so 55 projects, and would be presented during that half day before the championship game, and would compete against each other, and the best 3 posters would be selected, research posters would be selected. and they would get gold, silver, and a bronze medal. So Seton Hall has fielded 2 teams in 2022 and 2023 this year. We honored our team last year that did really well, and once again we want to honor our team this year. So if you look around, you'll see there are 5, well we're missing 1, so there's 4 of our presentations that were given this year at the Big East Conference, and these emanated out of presentations and research that was presented at last year's Academic Expo. So we would like to now honor those particular students, and in order to do that, we would like to honor them through the Office of the Provost. Katia Passerini is traveling, who's our provost, but we have nonetheless here, we have Jonathan Farina. Jonathan Farina is our interim associate provost for undergraduate education and assessment, and he is further an English professor and has an extremely distinguished career here at the university. So Jonathan, will you do us the honor of, I'll give them to you, you read the names. So, and better you than me because I have a hard time pronouncing names.
Thank you. So first, Jonathan Zhang.
So Jonathan has this poster over here. Yes, take a picture, Jonathan. You can all stay up here, and you don't have to run away. As you come up, we'd like to take pictures with everybody.
All right, next we have Shreya Rawat.
Shreya's poster is in the back.
All right, we have Nizar Nakrachi. I should say that Katya did sign them, so it's a legitimate signature. Karen Liu. And Kiara Jesus Rosario. And lastly, Shabeli Bania.
Oh, she is. Okay, good.
Thank you. Congratulations, everybody. And I invite you all to compete to be our next year's candidates.
Thank you, Dr. Farina. So as Dr. Farina mentions, this year we will be selecting among the best of the best during the expo to field next year's Seton Hall team to the symposium. And we're looking forward to seeing all your posters this week. So the final point I'd like to bring to your attention is, as I mentioned earlier, this is a group effort, very much so. This is one of the largest committees on campus. It encompasses faculty, administrators, staff, students, undergraduate and graduate students, everybody's involved, from catering to janitorial services to everything. It encompasses the entire campuses, South Orange campus, the Nutley campus, our School of Health and Medical Sciences and School of Nursing participate in it, as does our law school. So this isn't a university-wide event. So my final point is this kicks it off. This is the opening ceremony. So we encourage you to go to the different events that are happening this week. There's a few immediately after this event, and we encourage you to go to them. And please serve yourself in the back. We have lunch for everybody. And thank you, and go Pirates.